Hi, I'm Liam Dann, New Zealand Herald Business Editor at Large, and this is a podcast about our relationship with money. We're not going to tell you how to get rich, we're not going to try and pick the next interest rate move. In this series, I talk to interesting New Zealanders about how money has shaped their lives and what they've learned about it through the years. With me today, I have the chair of Air New Zealand and ASB and Chapter Zero, a climate change directors group, Dame Therese Walsh. Kia ora, Dame Therese.
Kia ora, Liam. Lovely to be here.
Yeah, thanks for being here. There's a lot to talk about because you're involved in so much stuff. I mean, just even doing that intro, there are other things. And I also didn't mention, I guess the way to say it would be you're one of the key figures behind the success of the 2011 Rugby World Cup and the 2015 Cricket World Cup. You're certainly not shy, and the other one, TVNZ chair for a while. So you're sort of not shy of some fairly high-profile roles there in terms of, for a professional director.
Yeah, look, I love hard stuff, and I've had a really interesting and varied career, quite a weird career actually. Used to be a game of two halves, it's a game of three-thirds now.
Yeah.
And I don't think anyone could replicate my career if they tried. It's been a bit strange. But look, been blessed with lots of amazing opportunities and also been involved in lots of things, that you've said that have got kind of NZ in them and love that. I'm a true Kiwi at heart, so love anything that's kind of got that national focus, which is what I've been lucky enough to sort of be involved with.
Sure. Well, let's jump right back and I'll ask you about your sort of first memories of having money. Whereabouts were you growing up, and do you remember, the first time you actually had money to spend?
Yeah, I remember probably there's a couple of key kind of core memories from when I was little. Growing up, I grew up in Wellington and in a working class family. My first memory actually of sort of seeing money was my mother and I standing on our doorstep, and I was a toddler. It's one of my earliest memories, and my grandmother trying to give my mother on the doorstep a whole bunch of money, notes. I don't know what they were at that time, maybe $20 notes. Clearly, my parents were experiencing financial stress, and I remember that moment vividly because I kind of knew without anyone telling me there was financial stress, but I also felt a great deal of comfort that my lovely grandmother was offering us money. There was a backstop, if you like.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the first memory. The second memory was I did get pocket money. I don't know if it was 5 cents or 20 cents. It was coins, and you got lollies from the shop, and so you learned how to treat yourself, if you like. But also, even though I didn't grow up in a wealthy family, my mother was very clear that there were people worse off than us, and that community and charitable focus was important. So my younger sister and I used to combine our pocket money sometimes and send it to charities. So
wow, early on. So is that, so some weeks it was the 20-cent mixture and some weeks it was charity.
Exactly. And you kind of got an endorphin burst either way. You felt virtuous for helping people, or you had the sugar. Yeah.
So when you talk about, growing up working class family, what was it that your parents did?
Yeah. So my mother, I grew up in a large Catholic family down in Wellington. My mother worked all the time. She was a primary school teacher through having 5 children. She got a degree later and worked through that. So she was a bit of a workhorse, and, that was very clear to me growing up. Secondly, my father fixed washing machines. He did it on a flexible basis. He'd go to people's houses as he had the time or wanted to, or an appliance company would drop off a bunch of washing machines into our garage and he'd fix them. So he was a sole trader, and between them they made enough that I never went without a meal or a bed or anything like that. Like, we had the basics. I'd call it a happy, no-frills childhood. But it was clear to me that it was no frills, and that, they were very resourceful. There was probably times of stress. There was a lot of growing vegetables, handmade clothes, hand-me-down clothes, home baking, grandparents chipping in, that kind of thing. So it was that kind of an upbringing.
Yeah.
Which changed a little when I was 16. We can talk about that later. Something changed family. But up until then, that was kind of a good description of my childhood.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess, and these would have been the pre-economic reforms years when New Zealanders really did do a lot themselves. I mean, it was a different world at that point, wasn't it? I mean, I'm about the same age as you, I think, so I'm old enough to sort of have similar memories of that kind of world. Did you get part-time jobs?
Yeah, I did. I mean, look, I had lots of jobs, many different ones. I did a lot of babysitting, cleaning. I worked in a burger joint. I worked at a department store. So I did kind of every job going to try and make money as a teenager because, you wanted those things that, your parents couldn't give you, like the new clothes and I don't know whether it was a Walkman or whatever it was back in those days, the teenage kind of needs. And so that's really what I worked for, was to have a bit of those extras as a teenager.
Yeah. And did you sort of notice the world changing around you in the early mid 80s in terms of the economy and all that sort of stuff? When you look back now with the sort of economic context.
So it's really interesting. I think through the 70s when I was a child and the 80s when I was a teenager, I don't think I noticed much about the economics around me. My experience was that, I grew up in, as I said, a working class, no frills kind of household. Everyone worked hard, and I had five, I was one of 5 children. I didn't know anyone that was really in a different position. I felt like all Kiwis were in the same position. That's how it felt to me growing up. And as a teenager, I continued to, I got these part-time jobs, so I got some cash that I needed for those little luxuries. But actually, I didn't know anyone that went on an overseas holiday or got a new car, or to me, that wasn't an expectation. And so while I realised that particularly the 80s were quite tumultuous times economically in New Zealand, I didn't really notice it. When I noticed it was the early 90s when I started trying to get a job, but, a full-time kind of professional job. But other than that, it really went over my head, I'd be honest.
Yeah. And you mentioned that things changed around the age of 16. Was that economic or just a family thing? Or?
A bit of both, actually. So when my parents, as I said, didn't have it financially easy, and they were building a new house for retirement. So they had, construction costs had increased, and they went to build a new house for their retirement, and got hit with some costs. They managed to pay off their mortgage, and so now they were having a new mortgage, which is obviously not ideal at that time. So anyway, look, long story short, my father won some money in the lotto. Now, it wasn't millions of dollars, but it was enough to pay off the mortgage, to provide a little bit of retirement assurity, and they had a few experiences they'd never had in their lives, like buying a new car and going to Australia on holiday, things that some people take for granted today, but were very, very special back then. The tragedy of it was that was when I was 16. When I was, I think, 17, my father died very suddenly at an early age. So he was in his early 50s. So that was obviously incredibly sad. My mother, is a mother of 5 children, still got all the things to do. And as I said, she's always worked. So she was able to keep working. She had a little bit of financial security. But it really taught me that things can change.
Yeah,
and you get expected. So it gave me a sense of uncertainty, I suppose, about what might happen in life.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to say, that time around the sort of 86, 87, interest rates had gone up to about 20%. Yep. I mean, it must have been a huge relief to your parents to just have a little bit of buffer at that time.
Yeah, it was. And I mean, they certainly weren't, rich by maybe today's wealth standards, but it certainly just allowed them to be debt-free, which I think was the main thing as you kind of head into your retirement years. So it was a relief. It certainly changed things. It was a bit of a roller coaster ride. But, my mother's always worked. My father died young. So all those things have an impact on how you kind of think about things as you don't even realise it. You grow into an adult.
That's right. You look back. One of the things we've been asking people on Money Talks lately is the lotto question, weirdly, which is that, if you ever did or do fantasize about winning lotto, what is the sort of amount that you would fantasize about winning? Because, too much might upend your life and all that sort of stuff. Yeah,
well, I think because of my father's experience winning some money in the lottery and dying the next year, literally, I do not buy lotto tickets. It's something I don't like to do personally. There's a connotation for me. I think if you were to come into money, people come into money through, inheritances and other windfalls that could occur, redundancy payments and things like that. I think for me, it would be about being careful with that money, and secondly, what's a significant amount of money to make a difference to your life? I think it's for me, it's about if you've got the fundamentals covered, then anything extra is, if you've got your mortgage covered, if you can pay your bills and pay for the things that happen along the way that you don't anticipate, then anything you win on Lotto is just a bonus.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
If you earned a ridiculous amount of money from Lotto, you'd want to give it to other people. So I think for me, the way my upbringing's worked is that I like to be secure and I like to be able to cover the things that I don't expect, but I also don't aspire to being incredibly wealthy either, because there's a discomfort with that.
I mean, did your father passing, when he did that change the trajectory for you in terms of career or where you thought about going in life? And
look, I think there's a couple of things here. My father left school at a young age to take up a trade for various reasons. I think he always felt that acutely that he hadn't had other opportunities. I was probably the most conscientious out of my 5 siblings, and he was very, very focused on me. So he was probably a feminist, very, very focused on me, proceeding in an academic kind of sense and doing things. So that was very important to me to live up to that expectation. I think secondly, my oldest sibling, who's 11 years older than me, my oldest brother Pat, he is a very similar personality type to me, and he went on and did a business degree, and so I always felt I would follow in his footsteps. So there was a few things that were just subconsciously there that you just kind of, it wasn't like I sat there and had a light bulb moment. You kind of following some subconscious patterns in your mind, actually.
Yeah. I mean, so your choices were like business and accounting right through. You could see that pathway early on.
Yeah, well, because my brother was 11 years older when he got his business degree, it was clear to me at intermediate at that time that that's what I'd probably do. My father was very keen for me to be academic. I was no good at sciences and languages, so it was a very, very, clear pathway. My grandfather had got me to reconcile his checkbook from the time I was 8 years old. So I thought if I could do that well, then this would be a doddle. So didn't really understand there was much more to it than that. But anyway, all roads led to Rome, as they say.
Yeah. And I suppose I should ask because you are well known for that role as Chief Operating Officer for the Rugby World Cup and sort of leading the Cricket World Cup. Was sport a big thing in your life? Were you could there have been a pathway there?
It's very funny because I've been made a dame for sport administration. I sat on a couch the other night with Dame Farah Palmer and Dame Susan Devoy, who are world champions in their own right, and I'm like, gosh, I'm a fraud sitting here, aren't I? I participated in all sports as a kid. I was very, very active, but I was really, really not very good. But my entire family, my 3 older brothers, my father, the transistor radio was always going. We got up in the middle of the night to watch the All Black Test. So sport's just part of the Kiwi experience and so important. But I didn't get involved. I got involved through finances, through my business degree. They needed a chief financial officer. I stepped in. I was doing some work for them. They liked me. I stepped in. And the rest is kind of history. But sport, I think what I brought to sport was objectivity. I'm not an obsessive. I don't need to know if the ball's passed forward or backwards. I need to know whether the business and the model is sustainable. So for me, I brought a very different lens and, as the first woman in New Zealand rugby's sort of senior leadership. And, so I like to think I brought a different effect to the sports I was involved in.
I'm sure you did, and I'll jump back a little bit, but first, just going into that world of the rugby union. It's not that long ago, but it is a decade or so ago. I mean, was it all those things you'd expect, a very sort of conservative male world?
Yeah, it was actually 20 years ago when I first walked into New Zealand rugby, and at that time there was a bit of a massive upheaval. Sir Jock Hobbs, sorry, probably would be a Sir if he was here today. May he rest in peace. He came in as the chair when there was some issues around Rugby World Cup, and Chris Moeller became the CEO very shortly thereafter. I've worked with them, Steve Chu, others in rugby, and I look at the time when I first walked in, it was a novelty. It was strange. I used to walk into the board meetings to present and that everyone would stand up, which of course you keep doing every day in business, or you'd
never get anything done. Yeah.
So, but everyone was very respectful, but it did have a conservative, male-oriented vibe to it. Let's be honest.
Yeah. Well, look, I'll jump back because so obviously you've done an accounting degree. Was that at Vic?
Yes,
Yep.
yes, I went local.
Yep.
Just
Yep.
did the short and sharp 3-year BCom.
Yeah, and my sort of bias in economics is a little bit around coming out of university in the early 90s. We had 10% unemployment, and it was a tough economy. How was it for you coming out into the workforce at that time when the economy was probably, even having covered the GFC and the COVID, probably it was worse then than it's been. Certainly in terms of unemployment.
Yeah, look, the key thing for me coming out of university, I mean, I survived through university. They're never easy times at uni. You're taking the calculator to the supermarket and all of that. But actually, when I came out, getting a good job in a big professional firm was the goal. And I managed to achieve that. I only got one job offer. That was from KPMG. I had a good kind of chemistry with them, and I went. I had a really good few years at KPMG and got the most amazing grounding. Like, there is not a day in a board meeting where I don't use some of the skills I learned in those days at KPMG in my everyday work. So really, really valuable. And I was lucky to get a job because the economic context, as you say, things were really difficult for people. But a couple of years later, when we went to buy our first home, things had moved on a little bit, and it was probably a good time. So got in with what was a very basic house, but great to be on that home ownership ladder.
Yeah, and I'm assuming that some of the poorest times would have been as a student. I often ask people what the poorest they've ever been was.
Yeah, well, I mean, like I say, probably was technically poor when I was a child, but my parents protected me from all of that. But as a student, and probably in those couple of early years at work, there was a lot of that student type stuff. I got credit card advances to pay the rent. I took the calculator to the supermarket. It was all very hand to mouth. But you knew that was for a time, and you knew that it would, if you got into a job, you'd earn a bit more every year and things would come right, hopefully. But that was really just the only aspiration, was just to come right and be able to cover all those basics. That was really the aspiration at that time.
Yeah, and I guess, an accountant, people have assumptions, but when I ask people, are you a saver or a spender? I mean, are you cautious with money generally?
Yeah. I'd say I'm a strange mix. I'm quite conservative in the sense that I do want to have financial security. That's really important to me. I want to have financial security, and I want to be able to cover the unexpected. However, and it's possibly because I did lose my father young, I do have a bit of you've got to make the most of it and you've got to enjoy it kind of sentiment. So I am known for a little bit of spending. Yeah. I certainly am really clear that you have to do things within reason when you can, because you might not be able to do them later. So I'm a bit of a weird mix in that regard, Liam.
Sure. It seems like a sound approach to me. One more thing about career is, I guess, I've talked to a lot of people who've come through, KPMG or the other big accountancy firms, and it's a pretty appealing lifestyle. You can travel the world. Some people stick with it their entire career. Was there something that made you want to jump? Yeah,
look, I really enjoyed my time at KPMG, and I was convinced I would become a partner. So it's probably around 28 when I made a change, and at that time I was talking to the then chairman of the firm about what a pathway to partnership would look like for me. However, I'd had 2 children, so I had a child. I got pregnant at 24 and I think 27, something like that. And actually, I was a bit torn around home, work, career, all the things that often women deal with. And I wasn't convinced I wanted to be a full-time partner, and there wasn't really an alternative model at that time. So I was working part-time. The New Zealand Rugby Union took me on a secondment to fix up some things, and their chief financial officer left, and I just didn't leave. So it wasn't sort of a obvious choice I made in the first instance. It just sort of evolved, and in the end, I decided that I could work even more flexibly at New Zealand Rugby and have children. That proved to be completely untrue and not the case. I had to work really, really hard, and I gave up working part time very, very quickly. But that was it was always my desire to be a partner and to stay in the firm.
Sure, but I guess, things, as the kids get a bit older, you get more scope and more opportunity just to take on more and more, which is kind of happened with the professional directorships, I guess.
Yes, and I mean, look, to be clear, from an early age, I did work. I went back to full-time work because, A, it's probably my personality type, and B, there was some financial freedom that came with that. But I like the challenges, and, it's hard being a young mum at home. So all of those things contributed, and I probably didn't realise it, but I got more ambitious every year for more challenge and opportunity.
Sure. Talking about ambition, sort of, this is a bit of a loaded question, but if you were in charge and it was Prime Minister Dame Therese Walsh, what's something that you would like to tackle, that you would tackle first or put top of the list if you were really wanting to change things and address poverty and some of the inequality in New Zealand? Big question, I know, sorry.
Very big question. I'll try my best with a shortish answer, but look, obviously poverty and things like that are complicated situations, and I think improving financial literacy and improving education, all those things are very, very important, and I think most governments know that. Having been working in and around government for a long time, the thing that I would like more of, and that I'm heartened by, because this government and previous government are both interested and have made steps towards, is interagency collaboration. We've got a lot of social inequity in New Zealand comes from some people who have had numerous disadvantages, complex issues, and unless we get that interagency thing going really, really well, we can't, as a country, support people to get into a different position. I'm an ambassador for the Wellington Homeless Women's Trust, and when I spend time with the residents or the people that actually run the house, those needs are incredibly complex, and the whole purpose for the trust that I'm an ambassador for is to come together around a woman's needs and actually say, okay, there's actually 12 things driving her current position of homelessness, and we need to actually solve all of them. We can't just solve one. Can't just give someone a bed for a night or an extra $100. You actually need to solve all the problems. So to me, it's that collaboration thing that's critically important. Look, and just reflecting on my role as the chair of ASB Bank, even in the time I've been on the board, I've noticed a huge change. We are so focused, and it's the thing that gives me the real satisfaction in the role. We're so focused on people's financial well-being and vulnerability. And actually, I remember when my parents used to go to the bank, it was quite a combative sort of thing. I don't know, it was kind of transactional. I think today, we really are trying to change that model where people get guidance and advice early. Come into your bank, whether it's ASB or any other bank, come and talk to people. And I think if you get into a difficult position, it's hard for people to reach out for advice and support. And actually, that's all we want to do is provide support and advice. And so I think that's something that I really want to see more of of people to embrace that.
I mean, you mentioned interconnectedness, getting agencies working together. I mean, in terms of straddling political divides, you seem to be pretty good at that, working across, both parties. Is there a sort of a philosophy you bring to that in terms of, what are the big economic principles that sort of underpin your decision making? Is it people often, there's the left-right thing, but how do you sort of look at all that?
Yeah, well, I'm only interested in economics with purpose. So all my career has been made up of jobs where there has to be an underlying purpose. I have to have that to get out of bed in the morning. And look, when you talk about left, right, red, blue, green, yellow, whatever political party you're talking about, my experience of politicians is that most of them want to get out of bed and make a real difference to this country. There are different economic philosophies and principles. I'm quite balanced. Like I want us to be a really ambitious, productive economy. And I think the thing some people miss is that, in order for any government to provide really fantastic services to all New Zealanders and to allow us all to kind of thrive, we have to be incredibly productive, and we have to pay taxes, and we have to do all these things. And that can be tough. New Zealand is facing into, and I know I'm getting a bit off topic here now, Liam, but New Zealand is facing into what I think will be a really important 5 to 10 years for probably the next 50 to 70 years of New Zealand's economic future. And so I am incredibly interested in us thinking about our levels of productivity, how industries are adjusting to new technology, and as a country, what we're going to be known for. So I do work with politicians of all types, and I agree with some principles and not others, but I like a balanced approach.
Sure. I mean, you mentioned at the beginning Project Zero, and it might be a good place to come back to telling us a bit about what that is, but also, how that fits into that strategy or that thinking around New Zealand productivity in the future, and I guess dealing with both or all the major parties on that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've got so much to be grateful for in New Zealand in the sense that we are our own country. We don't sort of, straddle anybody. There's no boundaries. And we have really great natural resources, and we can produce safe quality food. But there is a big transition, that is upon us, both from a technology and from a climate change perspective. And it's how productive we are leaning into that in this next 5 to 10 years, as I said, that will define our future. And so we need to increase our levels of productivity. We need to be pivoting and transitioning industries using technology and with a climate change focus to make sure that we continue to be leaders in certain fields. And I think COVID's been a really difficult time, and it is a big change for a country that's been really known for certain things for quite a long time. So there is a really sharp transition upon us.
Does that, I guess, being chair of Air New Zealand, that must bring a perspective to, and I know Air New Zealand is working on stuff in that space, but in terms of driving Air New Zealand to think about some of those challenges?
Yeah, and look, Air New Zealand is a tricky one because, of course, we burn fossil fuel every day, which is not good for the climate, but we are incredibly focused on next generation aircraft, sustainable aviation fuel, etc. Because what we learned in COVID made it painfully obvious that we are a small country down the bottom of the world. If we can't get on planes and connect, we very quickly lose our relationship capital, our ability to do business, our ability to understand the world, and for the world to understand us. And that is something that's always been really important to us. So I take Air New Zealand's role in the economy really seriously in that regard. And so we have to find answers to the fossil fuel. So we're doing everything we can, going as fast as we can. But if I go back to the banking sector, we're having to work with all of our customers to understand what the climate change impacts are for them, because that goes across the whole economy. And everyone's dealing with different opportunities and different risks at the moment. And so there's a really pivotal role in the banking sector or the finance sector to make sure that we're supporting businesses where we should be to move forward. So it's complex time.
Yeah, sure. And one more thing just to touch on, because you are involved in a group with some other fairly powerful women in business on being bold. Can you tell me about that? And really, I guess, is it about addressing the imbalances at the top there in terms of the gender equity and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think it's the fact that Joan Withers, Alison Geary and myself, who are three kind of members of the senior director community in New Zealand, we're often getting requests from women who wanted to talk about the struggles in their lives, just as we've had struggles in our lives, like, should you stay at home, should you work part-time, what career path should you take, etc. So we got together and realised that there was a lot of need for this. So we got together, this large group, 9 of us, and we do a number of things, from working with Year 13 girls about creating visibility of role models for them in terms of what's possible in the future. I was lucky, as I said earlier, I had my older brother that I could think I could follow that. But if you don't have that, it's hard to imagine. So that's a really important part of what we do. But we also run this conference, we're up to sort of 1,100 women in the business community that come to this conference called Bold Steps now. And we just have the most amazing day talking about people's, not just women, but mainly women, lives, experiences, the challenges, the struggles, all those things. And it makes us all feel normal and human and able to take on the next challenge. And this year we've got keynoting Indra Nui, who, if you don't know her, she was the global CEO of Pepsi and very close to the Barack Obama government and works closely with the US and Indian governments. She's Forbes Fortune top, powerful woman, and she's coming. And how exciting is that? So just sharing thing is really, really amazing.
That's great. Look, I think a big part of all of that is getting people talking about money. So look, I'm going to wrap it up there, but just say thank you very much for coming and talking to us about life and money. Cheers. Enjoyed it. Thank you. And thank you for listening. If you've got feedback, drop me a line, liam.dann@nzme.co.nz. Thanks to my producer, Ethan Sills, and our editor, Leanne McDonald. Follow Money Talks on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts. Catch you again next week.